Hazbin Hotel is an incredibly popular crowd-funded initially project involving a bunch of people whose names I sort of vaguely know if I squint hard enough at them. People like Pop and Stephanie Beatriz and Keith David and Brandon Rogers and Darren Criss, all about a show set in hell where a character called Charlie Morningstar attempts to redeem sinner demons so that the angels can stop coming down and just slaughtering all of them in a big old purge.
That every year they would send down an army, an extermination.
It's got drama, it's got comedy, it's got pretty interesting character development and lots of fun involving the premise of being in hell, and so in a place where the laws of reality can get bent a little bit in the name of making things intriguing, and it has an art style that, no matter which side of the fence you might fall on, you can at least describe as standing out from the crowd. Extermination is entertainment! It's certainly not looking like all those Netflix shows in regards to the way that it animates people, or at least in my opinion, having spent a bit of time watching the deluge of one-season shows that get thrown our way. Now, as you might be able to guess from the parameters that I put on those statements just there, this is a bit of a controversial series. It really epitomizing that divisive nature of modern fandom that sees you either love a show or hate a show and then want to murder each other over it. I'm going to say something that might annoy both sides here, and admit that from watching the first season, the only season released so far, but it did do well, so expect more down the line, well, from that first season, I found it to be perfectly fine. I don't think it was amazing, it didn't blow me away, but it also didn't really upset me deeply. I don't know, I've seen a lot of opinions flung at it, a lot of them which are heavily influenced by its creator, the aforementioned Pop, Vivian Medrano, who kinda gives me some heavy old school Tumblr vibes, so I guess it makes a lot of sense that she got such aggressively varied responses. Like, there is a little bit of self-insert going on here in the show, but also a lot of creators put themselves into their work.
Hello! I was wondering if I might trouble you.
In fact, I think most do, and I would rather that you do that than have some soulless corporate mess. So I don't particularly see a problem with that. But we wouldn't be here and talking today unless there was something trans to talk about. And this is a pretty damn queer series. So there is actually a little bit more than the usual nothing much trans in here to sink our teeth into. Perhaps not as much as I would have liked, considering how overtly gay the whole thing is.
Oh, Charlie.
The wings are new.
But you know, it's a season 1 thing. I mean, damn, look at Sex Education. They took forever to finally put a trans person into the show about kids dealing with gender and sex and sexual identity, so that's pretty crazy. And don't worry, I'll get round to that one too at some point.
I wanted to do something special, but it's no pressure.
So let's talk Sinners, Angel Dust, and Sallie May, shall we?
Mr. Box, Mr. Box, question.
Now, the first part of this that I need to cover in some small way is the idea of the sinners themselves, the various characters who make up the world of Hazbin Hotel, and are those demons who were previously human before committing crimes or something considered worthy of damnation, and now find themselves occupying every nook and cranny of each episode. They aren't every character, but they sure are a lot of them, and the reason that I bring them up at all here is because while they have demon forms, and that the forms that they take are influenced in some way by the sins that they committed or exist as some kind of manifestation of their soul,
Maybe in trouble with some loan shark.
it does raise some questions about how a transgender person would then appear, due to that whole manifestation element. I mean, does the soul of a trans person evoke the gender identity that they were assigned, or does it align with the one that they identify as and feel strongly towards? The reason I bring this up is because what this basically means is that many of the sinners in the show could be transgender people whose forms are now physically aligned with who they identify as, and so they don't need to necessarily go around qualifying themselves as transgender. If everybody manifested as who they felt like they were, then the factors that go into defining much of the trans community wouldn't necessarily exist, and so maybe every Sinner character in the show is transgender. We just don't know. However, that as an argument I have seen from people about the show is ultimately an unsatisfying one. On par with all the people who argue that characters who don't specifically state that they are cisgender in TV shows or movies could be transgender. Like, yeah, I guess that could be true, but it also doesn't mean much when we are looking for explicit and clear representation to give us something to connect with as a community, and for ways to humanize us to larger audiences, who will see trans people on their screens and connect that to their subconscious interpretations of us.
Folks whose storyline is much bigger than that, because us being trans is not our only story.
We kinda need actual trans people, and that can be done loudly or subtly, but it does need to sorta get done at all. It's pretty rough relying on maybes and headcanons and theorizations, especially when all of that might not reach or jump to the mind of that wider cis audience who really needs to get the fuck on board with trans people faster and faster these days.
That there are only two genders, male and female.
So the general idea of the sinners being trans is something that could be true, but not a thing which I can really lord anyone over, nor can I really talk about what it expresses, because there just isn't anything there at all to work with. If you feel that way, then great, that's fantastic for you. But unfortunately, not everyone is going to be there with you on that, and so we need our genderqueer and transgender characters to actually come out the box. Which connects to our next person to talk about, specifically that of Angel Dust.
Better advantage of the talented celebrity you have right here.
Now, Angel Dust is a major character within the series, being the first sinner who the hotel attempts to redeem, as well as a famous porn star who came downstairs because of their involvement with the mob. They became a porn star after coming downstairs. They came downstairs not because of the porn stuff.
When Angel died, did he immediately get into sex work or do mob fam stuff first?
Angel got into sex work pretty early on.
Now, within the show, Angel Dust acts in a way that is based upon a lot of drag queen personas, and interpreted through much of that subculture's presentation. Something that a lot of people have for a long time confused with transgender identity, due to the fact that a lot of people connect a man dressing as a woman for the purpose of entertainment with a woman dressing as a woman because the marker of man that was thrust upon her was poorly applied and not actually accurate. A confused overlapping that has become further cemented for quite a few of those people by the appearance of trans femme drag queens too. And you see a bit of that here, as the visual way that Angel Dust presents themselves during the show is one that utilizes many feminine aspects and androgynous features. While Vivzy Pop makes it very clear in the pilot streams discussing the creation of the show that Angel Dust is a cisgendered man who just enjoys fluffing up his fur into a breast-like form and utilizing feminine forms for the purpose of appearing how he enjoys without it necessarily being an indictment of his gender, I do still think this is an important thing to consider when it comes to that more wider conversation about gender queerness in media. See, we have transgender and we have cisgender, but these are not completely separate and removed from one another worlds and bubbles. They overlap and interweave in ways that if we spend the time on noticing, we can do the effort of normalizing gender as this thing that is less explicitly structured and rigid and aggressively split binary, but more of a vague concept that is connected to a bunch of different stuff. And so a character like Angel Dust comes along, a character who straddles the line of that gender representation while being definitively cisgender male in his internalized identity, and that can be used to raise and answer a lot of questions. Questions that people might have, such as how does gender presentation play a role in the idea of gender? To which the answer is as much as the person involved feels like it does. Something that Angel Dust connects with a lot. He might express himself in ways that we think of as feminine and engage with aspects of cultural femininity, but he can do all of that while still being a man.
Cut the act.
It's not an act! It's who I need to be!
What we do does not define who we are, unless that's how we feel like it or want it to be. I mean, there are certain people out there who go around trying to enact a uniform version of existence with regards to gender. People who are both cis and trans. People who might look at what Angel Dust does and go, well, that must make him actually secretly wanting to be a woman because that's what he feels like to me because he does feminine stuff. But just because you feel that way doesn't make it so for him. And that is a useful thing to have represented within a show. It's an important thing to express, even in some small and unspecifically addressed way, because when gender gets broken down like this, it is only beneficial to the long-term conversations that we need to have around it. It can only be useful for getting people to think about it, to getting people to consider alternative and variant forms on gender expression that they might not be familiar with, and that is something that is representationally advantageous for all of us, cisgender and transgender alike, but it feels the most necessary for breaching the boundaries around the transgender community's less clear-cut binary members.
The first regular character on American television that identifies as non-binary.
When it comes time to get people on board with gender fluidity, bigender, agender, non-binary, we kinda need to have people open to seeing gender in a grander way than just simply male and female. Trans man / cis man who does masculine, and trans woman / cis woman who does feminine. So that's the importance of Angel Dust to me here. But there is an actual trans character who appears in the show too, and now that brings us to the more difficult conversation when it comes to transgender representation. Not just engaging with progressive ideals, not just exploring gender, but actually taking a member of our community and putting them in some kind of spotlight and hopefully doing that well. Yeah, let's talk about Sallie May, shall we?
No, they won't. What? I'm right, ain't I?
Okay, so it is at this point that I have to apologize to all of you a little bit, as I might have slightly lied about the exact placement of the trans character in Hazbin Hotel. See, Sallie May isn't actually from Hazbin Hotel. She's from the side series. It's not exactly a spin-off, but it is set in the same universe and uses a lot of the same premises for its development. That of Helluva Boss, a show which centers around a bunch of imp demons who work for IMP, an organization that specializes in assassinations.
Excuse me, the fuck?
We don't need to go too deep into it for this, but it is worth noting that imp demons are not another form of sinner. So they aren't previous humans who now occupy this hell plane, and due to that, the way that they connect with the transgender identity we are considering is one that is more directly linked to how we might think about it. Specifically due to the fact that they do have some explicit gendered markers in the form of their horns being different colour bandings. In female imps they have larger black bands with smaller white, and in male imps they have smaller black bands with larger white. Something which will be visually very relevant super fast. So, in Helluva Boss, our trans character Sallie May mostly appears as a side character in the episodes Harvest Moon Festival and Sinsmas, as the sister of one of the main characters, Millie. She sort of just pops up, does a couple of jokes here and there, and doesn't really have much more to her than that, except for the fact that she has a deeper voice that maybe clues some people into her trans status, when combined with her appearance being a definitively feminine one.
How pissed would you be if I bet on him dying?
I mean, it's no explicit element, there are cis women with deep voices too, but it is something, and when combined with the fact that Sallie May's model has the male gendered marker horns that we mentioned just beforehand, it builds the case for this being a transgender woman imp, who has transitioned at some point previous to this show. However, we do get a lot more content from her appearance in Hell's Bells, which is one of 4 so far released Helluva shorts that spun off from the Helluva Boss series and featured little vignettes about the characters that had been established so far.
Sister! You finally made it out!
I say so far quite a bit there because this is all very much an ongoing series. Like, Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss and Helluva Shorts are all still releasing new content right now, are all still putting out new seasons, and so whatever I'm saying or will say here has a somewhat mediocre chance of receiving an update down the line if things drastically change in transgender representation within the show. And perhaps there might be more explicit trans representation put into either Hazbin Hotel or Helluva Boss. Like, I would kind of enjoy having my community given a bit more of a spotlight, especially at a time when the only spotlight that we seem to be getting is a super negative and aggressively attacking one from right-wing media.
Oh, my boy, or whatever it calls themselves now.
But I am getting a little bit lost in the weeds, which generally tends to happen when we start spinning off into series off the beaten track. As I was saying, Sallie May pops up in a more expanded appearance within this online short episode. And you would think that during this episode, when the 2 sister imps have a heart-to-heart with each other over their busy day in Imp City together and their differing lives, that the transgender element might come up in at least some small mentioned way.
With so many exciting things here, it's no wonder you never make your way back home.
You would hope and think that, because we've had the visual pieces that give us some hints towards who she is. We've had the bits that let us at least kind of point at her and say that she is probably transgender. And frankly, this vignette just doesn't really go there. It covers a few other things, discusses the way that Sallie May feels abandoned on the family farm by her sister who moved to the big city, how she feels like they don't spend much time together at all, and sort of centers the episode around these two renegotiating their sisterhood and friendship through that. The transgender element doesn't get mentioned at all, which does raise a question there that I'm sure you're asking of me right now, and if you're not asking that question, then you bloody well should be, and that's, how do I know that Sallie May is transgender? I mean, sure, we've mentioned the horns and the voice, but that doesn't mean shit. What proof do I have that extends beyond the same level of headcanon that people use to argue that Lucifer is trans in this series?
You are much shorter in real life.
Who is this? Who is this man? Are you the bellhop?
Am I just another headcanoner? And that's a darn good question, to which the answer is that I do have proof of it, and for that proof, we have to look to the real world. To the behind-the-scenes voices of the creators and the voice actor for Sallie May. See, the voice actor is Morgana Ignis, who confirmed all of this on a Twitter post. A Twitter post which also featured her mentioning that Sallie May is transgender as well, much like herself. So yeah, it's a trans character being voiced by a trans actress, which for that alone gets a big thumbs up from me, and this confirmation from Morgana Ignis got reaffirmed by the Helluva boss Twitter as well, which tweeted this in response. So yeah, that's the thing that I have to back this take that the character is transgender. It's literally transgender and confirmed by everything but the character within the series. And while I might have some exasperations about the way that we haven't had the word transgender mentioned within the show itself, at the very least there are some influences that Morgana Ignis has had on the character design and the way that the character expresses herself, including apparently the merch for the character, which she argued for it to have a visible bulge on it to indicate that Sallie May was comfortable with her physical body in that way, and that having a dick from her perspective didn't impinge on her identity.
I don't have bottom dysphoria. I do not have shame about that, and that is how I would look in this outfit. It's how I would fucking look. Something
which is an interesting way of representing the fact that our community is not a monolith, and the dysphoria of our bodies does not hit all of us equally at the same time. And see, having that be an example of variance in expression as detailed by Morgana in this YouTube live that she did, is a hell of a lot better than it being an example of just fetishization of trans bodies. Something that we have kind of seen in the past with trans characters' physicality as designed by cis people. But yeah, I have to give some props to Vivzy Pop for the fact that she knew she wanted a trans character in her series, and she went to look for a trans actress to play that role, and then proceeded to give that trans actress some modicum of creative control over the character that she would be playing. A recognition of the importance of lived experience that is a good example for other creators to follow. All of them should be doing this. It's going to lead to a more real and more in-touch representation than the stereotypes and more easily accessible known information that a lot of cisgender people rely upon for building trans characters and trans lives in their minds. So that's my takeaway at the end of all of this. That despite how you might feel about this show, and good lord, based on the comments on just me saying I was making a video on it, the opinions are massively varied, that it does have some interesting perspectives presented on gender and its fluidity.
Ouch! Ooh, such an insult. Tell the missus I said hi.
That it does have a trans woman who is played by a trans woman and who expresses herself in ways that don't necessarily seek to hide that trans identity, even if it's not made the focus or highlight of her appearance at any point during the series that she appears in.
You think things didn't get busier for me back home when you decided to scooch?
And that this is a good step on the right path. I would argue for more trans representation, if anything. Like, yeah, one character is great, but imagine if we had two. And imagine if there was three and one was a trans man or a non-binary character or any of the other many different groups that exist under the trans umbrella. Heck, you could even have an episode involving a trans person talking to another trans person, both of whom are established as trans, but discuss something other than trans identity. It's my own personal version of the Bechdel test. What Hazbin Hotel is doing here is good. I'm not arguing against that, but we can always be striving for better, and frankly, the need for more transgender representation is not going anywhere. The demand for more of us on the screen to break apart that monolithic view of us that comes to be defined by stereotypes and then influence future stereotypes is one that is not done yet. So well done Hazbin Hotel, but let's do some more trans characters. How about that?
Tomorrow it will be a fucking happy day.
Anyways, that's my take on the series. If you liked what I said, or found it to be educational, or just enjoyed my role as background noise, then that's fantastic, and exactly what I'm aiming to be. If you really liked what I do here, then the best way to show that is by going to my Patreon or Ko-Fi linked below, and helping to fund the channel. The money on there is massively essential to keep things running. It allows me to pay for all the bills that I need to pay to be able to keep making videos. Stuff like rent, power, internet, food, cats, and I am immensely grateful to everyone who does support the channel through that. It means a huge amount to me to see people so invested in what I'm making that they're willing to pay me to keep it going, especially considering the fact that I don't get a lot of sponsorships. I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're about once every 3 to 4, maybe 5 months at this point, and the YouTube ad revenue is very spotty based on the fact that ads are pretty hard to come by for queer content. So I am very dependent upon my Patreon and Ko-Fi to keep going, and it's not just an economic reason either. It's also motivating on a personal level to think about the fact that anything that I make is going to be enjoyed by people who like my stuff that much. It gets me up, it keeps me going, and pushes me to want to keep writing and to continue with this series until eventually I reach the end point and make my big conclusion on trans representation in TV and film. So far, it's a pretty mixed bag. But aside from all that, I also want to say a huge thanks to everyone who watched this video. You're also massively important to this channel going as well, and if you'd like to help a bit more too, you could like, share, subscribe, comment, or go and look at my other videos that should be getting recommended on the side or on top of this video. I think there's some pretty cool stuff in there, and I've got things that are positive and things that are negative and things that are completely unrelated to trans stuff at all, so there's some variety, you know? With all that said, another big thanks to everyone who made it this far and who watched this video at all. I'm hugely appreciative of everything that I have here, and I hope that you all have a great day.